You're listening to Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. We're coming to you from the unceded traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations around Vancouver, BC. I'm your host, Bernadine Fox, and this is the show that dares to change how we think about mental health. Welcome to Rethreading Madness.
When I've never been further from knowing what the hell I'm gonna do, when I can't seem to find my way under or over or through.
You're listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Ovid Thomas, who has been on our show before, and he talked about epigenetics. I don't think you were here as Ovid Thomas. I think you were here as another name. Do you remember what that name was?
Yeah, my adopted name is Frederick Thomas Edwards, and my birth name is William Ovid Pelly.
Okay.
And I'm sort of changing my name back to my birth name in a way, so by putting the Ovid back there, but also keeping the Thomas. They're both my middle names from both names.
Oh, okay. Names are important, and it's really important that we honor where you are in that path of reclaiming names. So good for you. Ovid, you were a 60 scoop kid. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
My mom was also in the 60 scoop. She was in the last part of it in the 1950s. Before they actually got funding to do it. I was taken in 68, and I was in foster care for a couple of years and then adopted in 1970. So I was adopted into a non-native home up in northern Manitoba.
What was the makeup of that home? Is it mom and dad, I assume? And did they have other children?
They had I had two older siblings, brother and a sister, and yeah, it was. I guess it wasn't okay. It wasn't great, I guess.
Were they all white, or were there other native children there?
They weren't native at all.
They weren't.
No,
no. Okay. When we talked, you talked about experiencing some severe bullying by one of your older siblings in the home. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we hear a lot from 60 Scoops kids is that there's a lot of trauma that happened to them in those homes. It wasn't that they were being taken out of trauma and being given into a good life somewhere. They were actually delivered to people who caused even more harm. Are you okay to talk about a little bit about what happened for you in that home?
Yeah, I was placed in a home where my older sibling was abusive. And in hindsight, I think my adopted parents were just as scared of him as I was. So I think part of the reason why they didn't stop him was because I think they were scared of him as well.
And what kinds of things was he doing that they were scared of, do you think?
He was very violent. He intentionally hurt the family dog, and he also threatened to do the same thing to me that he did to the dog, and wanted me to see it after he finished it. He used to torture me with different instruments, and he used to threaten me if I wanted that to be my last day. Like, he was just very brutal, very awful. And I guess it was just, having to live with that and having parents who didn't stop him was pretty hellish, I guess, to go through that for so many years.
And were you in that same home from the time you were a baby? I think you were scooped when you were like 2 weeks, weren't you?
Yeah, I was placed with them very young, and as in a foster kid, and then they adopted me later on.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the thing is, when I went over my adoption records it showed that I had severe health issues on multiple occasions, yet for some reason, the adoption agents didn't regard that as a concern, and they just let the adoption go through.
What kind of health issues did you have?
Like severe pneumonia. There was two different things. They were both could be indicative of neglect. Things that they should have taken care of that shouldn't have progressed so awfully. And I remember being hospitalized on multiple occasions as I was growing up.
For the same kind of thing?
Yeah, just for the things that that shouldn't have got that serious.
And so when you think about that and you look back over your childhood, I'm assuming childhood means 16, 17, 18 before you left.
Hmm.
Um, would you say that what you experienced in that home was neglect?
Uh, I guess you see the thing is my parents. It was like sort of a narcissistic family in that um, my older sibling was like the golden child and I was the scapegoat. And in that sort of relationship, I didn't get a lot of care or concern,
Mm-hmm.
and pretty much all their attention and love, I guess, was aimed at my older sibling. And yeah, there wasn't really much as an adoptee that I got from that family.
Were the other kids adoptees as well, or just yourself?
No,
Just yourself.
um, my older like the older ones were all belonged to my mom, my adopted mom. She had two miscarriages, I guess, in 64, 65, and that's when she adopted me and my brother. So,
Okay.
and I don't think they meant to kept me. I think I was supposed to be a foster kid, but they decided to keep me when they said I was getting along with the brother.
Uh, so it was about the brother. It wasn't about you. There was something else that happened in your family that should have been about you, but it ended up being about your brother, and that you were very brilliant, and they wanted to move you ahead in school. Tell me if I'm getting this wrong. And they decided not to do that. Your parents decided because of how it might impact on your brother to have that happen. Is that
They,
correct?
my older sibling had failed a grade already, and
Mm.
my my adopted mom told me that if I was skipped ahead and passed him, it would affect him terribly and would probably make him quit school. And she didn't want me to skip ahead, and she told me that's why she was holding me back.
How was that for you, being held back?
For me, holding back was for me, school was a way to get away from there. I just
Right.
didn't want to be anywhere near that town. So for me, it was slowing me down, but I knew I was still on my way out. So it
Hmm.
was bad news, but it was just like one more year, I guess.
There were other things that happened in school. As much as school was your salvation on some level, there were things that happened there that because you were a First Nations first kid, they made assumptions about you. So you didn't speak for a while as a child. Am I right about
Uh,
that?
When I was younger, I had trouble when I first started school. I guess they didn't realize that I was partly deaf and I'm missing the upper 50% of my hearing. And they never tested me for that. And my sister Wendy also went through the same thing. And when she grew up, they didn't check her hearing. She was partially deaf, and she had trouble in school. And they raised her as a slow kid the whole time. So they were doing that to me too. They were treating me like I was having trouble in school. But when I got to the visual parts of class, like math and visual arts, I started to excel. And I also started to read lips. So my handicap didn't affect me as much when I was growing up.
When did they finally figure out just how brilliant you are, Ovid?
Uh, they started. I guess I'm not sure if they ever figured it out. They just kind of put up with me. Like I tended to finish my classwork usually within a month or two of the class starting. It didn't take me a full year. I would finish my books way ahead of time.
Right.
But yeah. So
Did
anyway,
you did you ever end up in a situation where they thought you were cheating or lying because they couldn't understand how you got to a certain place because they
I,
misper
on the Manitoba provincial exams, which were administered by the province. I scored 100% on the math exam, and I got taken into the principal's office because they thought I was cheating. But the math teacher would just laugh because he just said, that's just the way he is. Like he had no difficulty with me in that class at all because I just loved it. I loved math. I loved the sciences and things like that.
Mhm. So one of the things, I mean, what we're touching on here is one of the insidious parts of racism on some level. It's not like they're saying you couldn't have done it necessarily because you're a First Nations person, but
Mhm.
just the constant sort of assumption that you were incapable. That has to impact on people who go through that. And I'm not just talking about First Nations people, I'm talking about anybody who lives in a community or a place where certain people decide other certain people are just simply because they are that certain person. And it has an impact on you. How did that impact on you growing up?
Well, in grade 7, I found out that I wouldn't be able to take any university entrance courses at Frontier Collegiate Institute because they didn't permit Native kids to take university entrance courses. So I had to fight
Blanket
that.
statement. That's a blanket statement. No university entrance courses by First Nations kids.
Yeah,
Is
we
that
weren't allowed in the OO classes, they call them. They were identified by 100, 200, etc. And then those were the ones courses you needed in order to take, the university entrance English, math, and science that were required for university.
and so what year was that?
That was back in, God, that would have been 79, 80.
Right.
Yeah,
So not that long ago. Within our lifetimes, for most people on the planet right now,
yeah.
First Nations people were simply, absolutely, utterly banned from taking certain courses. But you changed that.
Yeah, I had to fight it. I had to go to the members of legislature, parliament, and the school board, and had to present on why I should have been able to take that course. And I was able to get entry for myself and then also everyone else in my school who applied.
So what arguments did they have to say why it was okay to ban people?
That's just the way it always was. When you're
That
dealing
was
with,
their excuse. It was
yeah,
always this way, and so therefore it must always be this way. That's a
yeah.
pretty thin argument.
It's a pretty standard argument though when you think about it. It's what a lot of people use.
It's
So,
true. It's always been this way, so let's
yeah.
not argue. So you went to university,
Mhm.
and
I did pretty good in the math part. Like I did, I scored A pluses on calculus and applied mathematics and things like that. But at the same time, I was drinking lots, and I was still doing really good in school, but I didn't have a great time growing up because of what happened with the abuse, and that's sort of one of the ways I coped with it.
well, yeah. I mean, if you grow up in a home where you are the scapegoat, um, by the time you get to the next, I assume you weren't in home and living in the home anymore when you went to university. Was that
No, I went to school and I did about 3.5 years of civil engineering and I was on my last year and I decided to quit and move out west where I started tree planting. But at the same time, I wasn't really having a good time at school. I was, um, because like I said, I was drinking. I wasn't taking care of myself, and it's one of the ways I dealt with the abuse from up north. And then that year, I just didn't want to be around anymore. And that's part around the same time I quit school and everything. And
so? What happened then? You didn't want to be around anymore. You went tree planting, but did that fix not being around anymore? Or did other things happen?
well, the tree planting, I guess I threw that in a little bit fast. Um, that winter, I got really depressed, and I tried to drink myself to death. Honestly, I gave up, and it was only after giving up that I finally confronted my adoptive parents about what happened and asked them about why they didn't stop it from happening. And in that confrontation, I was able to close things off for myself with them so that, we were done. Like I said my piece. I told them that they didn't care for me, that they didn't protect me, and that they were supposed to. And because of that meeting, they disowned me. But at the same time, I was able to say the things I needed to say. So,
So when, so let's just unpack that. You were stolen from your family at 2 weeks, given to a white family where you experienced severe trauma from your older siblings with parents that were neglecting you. So therefore, if I read between the lines of what you were saying, your life was in danger a lot of those days that you lived there, and they were not doing anything. So you confront them, and their response is to disown you. And if I'm remembering right, they didn't just disown you, they did it in a sort of very big way. They changed locks and moved and changed phone numbers. Am I getting that right?
mhm, yeah, they all changed their phone numbers. They didn't want to talk to me anymore. And that was the last time we ever talked. And I had every picture that I had of that family. I destroyed it at that moment. I decided that we were done forever.
Well, it's a pretty big statement that they made, which is, yeah, we adopted you, but you should have been grateful, and and coming back and saying these, it's really, it was all about them. It wasn't about you. So I understand why you did that. But you did something else, and when we come back, we're going to talk about that in a bit as well. So just stay right here, folks. We'll be right back talking with Ovid Thomas about what happened after he confronted his parents.
Mhm.
Hey, did you know Red Eye has a podcast? You can tune in to Red Eye every Saturday morning from 10 a.m. to noon, and now you can catch our interviews anytime. Look for the Red Eye podcast on iTunes, TuneIn Radio, or a host of other podcast apps. Or you can check out our latest episode right on our website, coopradio.org/redeye.
You're listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and I'm speaking with Ovid Thomas. And if you've been listening, Ovid is a 60 scoop survivor, but that, just to narrow his definition down to that, would be giving him a very slim bio compared to who he is and what he's been doing. So, Ovid, welcome back.
Mhm.
You had you had a terrible childhood. I'm just going to say it like that. I'm so sorry that you went through that. I'm sorry you were taken away from the people who probably would have cared for you in a much better way. Um, but you made it home. How did you end up getting home?
Um, yeah, I was fighting a slumlord back in Winnipeg, and I finally lost. And, I had to find a new place to live. And I was talking to my cousin who is from this parts and asking her for some ideas on who to talk to. And she mentioned that our um, Chief Dwayne Antoine, knew my father. So I did the research on, learned a little bit about what I could of the reserve. I I had come here about 34 years ago to get my status, and once I found out who my father was, my mother was way back then, but I didn't really have any connections here. And when I came here, my father had just passed, so I just missed that opportunity. So, honestly, I didn't think I would ever be able to come back here because I missed that moment with my dad many, many years ago. But when I started talking to people here, everyone started recognizing my voice, and it was because it was my father's voice. And people would ask for my Facebook or FaceTime or whatever just to be able to see me, just to realize that I look like my dad as well. So I'm really blessed because of that similarity, that it really opened up a lot of doors for me, and it helped me to move back here because a lot of relatives and people who knew my dad recognize him in me, and that really made it really easy to come back here.
So
And
really, really personal question. What is it like to know that you are so much like your own dad after all the I can't say that word that you went through, in a white family, being so displaced, the whole dysphoria of culture, to go back and not only just go back and have that sense of this is my home, this is where I belong, but other people saying to you, you are just like your dad. What is
yeah,
that like?
it's incredible because it really feels like I'm home because of that, because of the way that people have been very welcoming to me here. And it's really touched me a lot. And I'm really grateful for the relatives that have, reached out and wanted to hang out. It's fun having people I can talk to for a long time now. Like I haven't had people I can chat with for ages, but people I share, blood with, but I also share interests and yeah, it's pretty good being here. And I'm pretty glad to be here on the reserve.
So let's talk about that one little thing that you just said there, which is actually a big, huge thing, because I know that um, when you are displaced from family, and then come back in contact with family, there are little tiny things that happen that resonate in you in a way that doesn't happen anywhere on the planet other than in that place, right? The little things. Can you talk about that? I know we didn't talk about it before, so I'm kind of springing this on you, but can you talk about that? Like, what are those little things that can mean so much and that make it home?
Like I don't really know much about like my birth family, so it's like meeting my cousin Arlene. She's been so welcoming and so informative in terms of telling me the history of like who everyone is and how they're related and stuff like that.
Mm,
It's how I learned that that I did land in some emergency housing, but the housing they placed us in is on the land of like my you know uh, Mary Peamy is this woman here on the reserve who took care of all of the pretty much she took care of like 28 different orphan children
wow.
um, on here on Poundmaker Cree Nation, and she was pretty much instrumental in a lot of these children not being taken. So she looked after my dad. Um, yeah, like my dad was born to a young woman, and that's how he ended up under Mary Peamy's care. And then his grandfather, Patrick, I believe, Chatsis was also under Mary Peamy's care. Like she looked after so many different generations of people here on in the community during the time when a lot of people were being taken away by social services. So, but that was my father's side. My mother's side, though, she was taken by um, Child and Family Services at the time. So, yeah, we weren't all lucky.
No, no, it's no, you weren't. Um, and since you've been home, you have been able to connect. How long have you been home?
Since about almost 3 months now. Yeah.
So what are the things that you lost? And so, I mean, you were taken out of a culture. Did you lose language, or is the language there still intact? Did you lose customs? Did you lose ceremony? Did you lose, the things that are traditionally relationships between people, the things that people do with each other? What did you lose?
I don't know. I guess one of the things I lost is pretty core, I guess, is like trust.
Mm,
Like I have a lot of distrust in terms of information that I learned that I have to learn it myself and I have to study it myself. I have to look online, I have to go to the different sites. So for me, because of that distrust, the information that I'm finding in some of these TikToks is very different than what is the current information.
right.
So by doing research and checking out stories and listening to people and getting oral accounts as well as online, it's given me a different perspective than what people are being told in the history books.
Right.
So they're saying
Yeah.
that the stuff that I'm posting is pretty accurate and you know, it isn't typical of the information that's out there.
And I think that is probably true across Canada. And I say that because I have actually done some research from the other side, the sort of white side of pioneers, and have tracked down things they call fawns. That's basically somebody's journal or daily writing that have ended up being saved and published, and you can find them online. And you read the most awful things in there, like the way people talked about First Nations people, and you can see, I mean, the racism nowadays, the racism is sort of hidden amongst, politically correct conversations and things that people are know they should not say. But back then they didn't know that, and the things they said were unbelievable, but believable, because it makes sense about why they did what they did because of the things that they thought, and doesn't make it right. It makes it absolutely worse that they weren't able to consider that. So when I was thinking about what did you lose, and maybe it's an unfair question to ask somebody who has been home for not a long time to really be able to sense what was taken, because when it's taken and you were too little to know, you don't know. You just don't know what you don't know, right? So it'll be interesting to see what you find as you're going along in the years to come, what you gain back in those little things, those places. So you've been back for several months, am I right?
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah.
so not quite a year. And you're doing research on Poundmaker Cree Nation and what that means. So tell me a little bit about what that is.
Like, for example, my cousin, she told me some information about, the history of how the people lived here. Um, the chief came by and mentioned that Battle of Cut Knife. So I went up to the site and there was a lot of information there, including the original speeches from Poundmaker and Big Bear in terms of what they said at their sentencing.
Okay, so tell us a little bit first to let us know, because this program goes all over the world. Who are Poundmaker and Big Bear? Who are those people?
Poundmaker, he was I guess he was like 43 years old, and he was a chief here on Poundmaker Cree Nation, and he was um, he was sentenced. He was sentenced for the Frog Lake massacre. For he was blamed, I guess, for treason felony for leading his people into that conflict, and it was I think in 2019 that Trudeau, um, what is the term for that? I'm trying to remember what the term.
Pardoned? Did he pardon?
Pardon, yeah,
Okay.
exonerated him.
Okay.
Yeah, so they took away his what he was charged with and cleared his name, but they did not do that for Big Bear yet. It's just they've just done that for Poundmaker so far.
So can we step back half a second and tell us what the Frog Lake Massacre was for people who don't know?
Um, you have to go back to John A. MacDonald, where he was trying to. Um, it seemed like it was almost on purpose what he was doing, in that he was trying to starve the the First Nations. He was trying to drive them onto their land, force them through control of rations to stay on a small part of land. But at the same time as they were doing that, they weren't honoring they weren't honoring the rations that they were supposed to be providing each year, and they were purposely starving the natives. And he even stated that in the House of Commons, is that he had ordered those Indian agents not to, feed them, to save money. And so they were So the natives that were there, because the bison, the buffalo was pretty much all exterminated, they had lost their traditional ways of food, and at the same time, the treaties they had signed with the settlers, they weren't being honored, so they weren't getting the food that was supposed to be there. So a lot of them were starving. And some of these Indian agents were pretty awful people and took advantage of their positions. And the agent at Frog Lake was they talked about him being a very terrible man, where he took advantage of the women there and even the young women, and because of his position of power as the person who gave out the rations, and that led to the warriors, taking what I believe justice in their own hands, because there was no justice that would ever be provided by the system at that time. And as a result, they killed nearly a dozen settlers in that area, starting with that Indian agent first. And you know, two chiefs were blamed. One of them being Big Bear, and in his speech that he gave at his sentencing, he talked about how, you know, he wasn't even there at the time, but he's being blamed for it. And he had warned his men not to do what they did, but they went ahead and did it. And the Canadian system at the time looked at Big Bear as the leader of his men. They didn't recognize that, Cree leadership tended to differ in the context that you had a warrior leader or a political leader like Big Bear, and so they didn't recognize the Cree leadership structure, and so it's kind of a complicated thing, because it's like, in terms of the Cree leadership, it's called an Okima, which is a Cree word that stands for the leader. And it could be a leader who is the political spiritual leader, or a leader who is the warrior leader.
So the white legal system decided that Big Bear was responsible for what his men did, and he was held accountable with those men at the same time, or just him?
The 8 men themselves were tried. They were executed there. They were hung. There's 8 of them that were hung, and but they didn't assign that same law to Poundmaker and Big Bear. They were just assigned to time in Stony Mountain Penitentiary, where they were sentenced to 3 years. And both were released before the end of their term because of failing health. Whereas Poundmaker died at the age of 44 from a lung hemorrhage because of, the conditions in the penitentiary. And Big Bear as well died as a result of that. His failing health led to him dying of pneumonia.
And why was Poundmaker charged? What was that about? Like, how was his involvement perceived by white people that he was also charged? Did I miss that in
So,
the story?
no, Poundmaker led his people in,
Okay.
I think it was March 30th, I believe. They marched them to Battleford to petition for rations, because they were being starved out.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, the settlers were very on edge, because there was an uprising between the Métis and the mountain, what do they call it? The Northwest Mounted Police, they were called back then, not the
Right.
RCMP. They had actually had a skirmish at Duck Lake, and because of that, all the forts and that were on edge. So when Poundmaker led his people to Battlefords, they actually retreated inside the fort, and they refused to meet with them.
Hmm.
So Day, which was the Indian agent of Battlefords at the time, refused to come out, and so Poundmaker said some of his men apparently were looting some of the abandoned houses, and then he led his people back to Poundmaker Cree Nation, the reserve. And what happened was Colonel Otter arrived with 700 of his men, left half of them there, and then took half of them uh, to, face Poundmaker for what they considered looting. And so that's what Poundmaker was deemed guilty of at that time. And so they brought his men to Cut Knife, and they had a brand new gun, the Gatling gun, and they were prepared to use that. But the leader of the time, who was Fine Day, Okima Fine Day of the Warriors, he led Poundmaker's people to fend off that attack because of his knowledge of the land and his knowledge of strategy. He was able to make that Gatling gun useless in the battle, and they were able to hold him off for, I think it was 7 or 8 hours. And there was 8 men who died on both sides, and then Otter eventually, retreated. And because of Poundmaker and Big Bear both commanding their men not to follow and kill those men, that was one of the reasons they used to exonerate Poundmaker, but they still haven't done it to exonerate Big Bear.
I want to continue this conversation, but we just need to take a little break, Ovid, and we'll be right back, folks.
Tanuyap, Kuiget Yuans Kuinsna. Hi, everybody. My name is Kuiget Yuans. I'm a member of the Squamish Nation and the Yagalanas clan of the Haida Nation. You're listening to Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. We live, work, play, and broadcast from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations.
You're listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and I'm continuing a conversation with Ovid Thomas, who's a Poundmaker Cree, who is talking about some historical information right now about Poundmaker and Big Bear, both who came from Poundmaker Cree Nation and were charged and convicted for crimes way back. What year are we talking about here, Ovid?
Back in 1885. So,
okay.
Yeah, a lot of this happened then. It was Canada's largest mass execution was the 8 warriors who were hung.
Okay.
So
Poundmaker, when he was convicted, got up and said something, and that has been misconstrued. Although every time I use that term, I think that's not the right term. It's basically been distorted by white people, and they've said that he said things that he didn't say. Can you tell us what he actually said?
when Poundmaker gave his speech, he was provided in Plains Cree, and that translation is up there. You could look at it. But when he was giving his speech, a lot of the stuff that was written in his translation was assumed stuff. Like when he was citing, that he was recognizing the Queen of England and the way that she was regarded by their people as the law, they made assumptions on what he said as if he was acknowledging that it was his law, but he wasn't. He was just acknowledging it as part of their law. And he was also naming off, the relation for him, like his family, his people, his brothers, and then, the settlers. But when they read that literally, they made it seem like he was giving preference to the settlers in terms of their communication. So, like, he talked in terms of kinship first, family first, kinship first, but they didn't recognize those relationships of the people who were translating it, and they didn't carry those forward in what they wrote down, what people heard. And the same thing happened with Big Bear. Like Big Bear was talking about, you people who are wealthy, can you help, my family who are now poor, like who are in need. And the English translation says that you settlers are so handsome and I'm so ugly, and it which is complete,
Oh my God.
fabrication of what he said. Like he was acknowledging, they're in need and they need them to live up to these treaties because they need these rations now, right? Like he's being honest, and yet they're turning it around and they're making him sound like almost pitiful and ugly, which
is consistent with how white people saw First Nations people back then as being not very bright and They also made Poundmaker out to be saying I'm a criminal on some level, did they?
For Poundmaker, it wasn't so much him. It was they were making him seem like he was subservient to the queen, and that wasn't what he was saying. So
No.
they were twisting a little bit of what he was saying.
So it was important. It's important for people, if you really want to understand what happened back then, to go and look at the actual wording. Poundmaker and Big Bear both ended up outside of prison at some point, going home because they were ill. Is that correct? And they
Yeah.
both died because of those illnesses.
They both died months after they were released.
And that leads us to a TikTok. I mean, if you guys want to go and listen to Ovid talk, go and find his TikTok. He talks about all of this stuff. Ovid Thomas, you can just search him, you can find him. But one of the things that you were talking about recently on there is about how racism impacts on medical health for First Nations people. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what kinds of things are happening that we need to understand is happening to people because of our medical system?
So there's a bunch of different things that are involved. Like, because I'm dealing with being autistic and also trauma informed, I have a lot of different, responses that affected the way I work. I went into medical care. So in 2015, I had a burst gallstone, and I had gone to emergency 3 times, and 3 times I was rejected because they could not tell I was in pain. When someone is autistic or trauma informed, they can develop something called uh, hyposensitivity, which is you're either hyper or the reverse. You're not as sensitive to pain or to other different aspects. And when it's pain specifically, it's called hypoalgesia. And what it means is that you don't report pain in the same way as someone else. So when a doctor sees you and you're telling them that, your abdomen is in extreme pain and stuff like that, you're telling them like that, but you're not showing it. You're not screaming, you're not doubling over, you're not holding yourself, you're not crying. You're just telling this doctor that you're in pain, and they don't believe you because, for a normal presenting person who's in pain, they can see this person's in pain. But when you're coming from a trauma perspective or autistic perspective, you don't relate it, and they don't believe you that you're in pain. So they kept rejecting me, and it was only because another doctor actually did some blood work on me that they were able to recognize the poisons that were in my bloodstream that showed I was dying. And it was only because of that doctor calling my third, time I was being let out of the hospital that they actually agreed to administer me where I was taken in for multiple surgeries because of the damage that was done from this gallstone attack. But
So we just want to stop for a moment. Is that only for the combination of autism and trauma, or is it also true that somebody who is just autistic, which is a ridiculous thing to say, or just traumatized? I mean, I know people who've been traumatized who have a very high pain threshold who would do exactly what you're talking about, is that they could say I'm in pain, but they're not exhibiting it because, of course, when they were kids, if they showed that level of vulnerability, they would get hurt again. So you just learn not to do that. So
those are the things that I mentioned before in some of my previous videos where I was talking about epigenetics and how these different trauma responses become ingrained in you because they get awakened in your generation, because these are things that saved your ancestors in the past.
Right.
So things like, not only that hyperalgesia, but there's also, you might be hyper aware, hypersensitive, hypervigilant, and that you're tracking everything that's going on in the hospital. You're being very aware because that's what protected you in the past. But in a medical setting, they might look at you as that might be the wrong thing to do there. They might think you're dangerous, or they might think you're drug seeking, or,
Paranoid.
yeah, they don't realize that you might have a lot of trauma responses around you. You might be masking, right?
Yeah.
You might be masking to fit in because as an autistic person, that was something that kept you protected when you were growing up or when you were in trauma.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
a lot of things that you do to survive, because of who you are, they might look adversely at those different actions and treat you and not give you the treatment that you deserve at the hospital. So I almost died because of that, because they tried to send me home with a burst gallstone 3 times. And I shouldn't have survived that, to be honest. If I was sent home, I would have died.
Yeah. And of course, I have I'm connected to family on Sutana. I have a brother who died of the flu, which sounds outrageous. And a part of it was that he was sick and he did not want to go to the hospital. And a part of what that is I can't speak for him. If that was me, I wouldn't want to be going to the hospital because I would be afraid that I'm too sick to put up with or cope with people treating me horribly. I don't have what it takes. You get to a point of being too sick to actually cope with the racism that comes at you, where people diminish or discredit or don't see or don't recognize the harm that you're in. And he died because of
Mhm.
that. I have another person who has eye difficulties and needed to have needles put in his eye to inject certain things to help him. And the difference between him going and my white friend going is my white friend is given medication drops to numb his eye, and my First Nations friend was not.
Mhm.
And that kind of stuff is just so blatantly exposes the racism that exists in the medical field around First Nations people. So you're dealing with people who are perhaps autistic, but also perhaps other forms of neurodivergency, or you're dealing with somebody who's just traumatized, going in, needing help from a medical system and doing all the things that you're talking about and being misunderstood. And which means that white people need to do better. The white medical profession needs to do better.
Yeah, I had thousands of responses to that video, like it had, and so many of the responses were from people saying that the same thing happened to them.
Mhm.
And it's like when my sister she had 3 mini strokes, and every time we called emergency, they assumed that she was having a fentanyl, overdose. They didn't look at what was going on, and we had no idea it was a stroke. And we trusted them that they were telling us the truth. We didn't understand how she got fentanyl. We didn't know what it was, but we assumed that they were the experts. They were telling us the truth. So 3 times this happened. 3 times they accused her of, having a fentanyl overdose. And it wasn't until the final stroke, the big stroke, that she didn't want to go to emergency because she was scared they would treat her the same way again.
Exactly. Of
And so
course.
and so for over a day, she stayed home before I finally recognized her for what was wrong, and I took her in. But she did not want to go to the hospital because of the way she's been treated. That medical avoidance came from the abuse that she faced and the discrimination she faced.
Exactly. So what's being done about that? Do you know? I mean, we can talk all we want on here, and you can make a TikTok, but is there anything happening in the medical profession to educate people to do better?
No, they've named a couple organizations to deal with it. There's I think Southern Chiefs organization in Manitoba was going on the right path, but I'm not sure if if they if they resolved it or not. Many of them many of them were content to receive a generic apology from the government with no real identification about the issues that were involved in it.
So
So,
when you say they, who are the they?
oh,
Are
it's
these
like
people?
the government funded in Manitoba. They funded 2 major organizations to look at what was causing anti-Indigenous racism in Canada, in the province of Manitoba. And I don't know, the one that was doing the northern part just didn't really seem like they were zeroing on the reasons, but the Southern Chiefs organization, the southern one, was actually looked like they were on the right course.
Well, an apology doesn't do dick, quite frankly. It's not
Mhm.
going to keep people from dying. in the hallways because somebody has decided they're drunk instead of dying. So it's a little shocking to think that nobody out there is actually taking this on. It's not your job. I'm talking about the organizations, the politicians, the doctors' organizations who should be doing something different to make sure that people aren't dying.
I had a bunch of people tell me that the TikTok video that I did, and then the issues that I was bringing up, other people hadn't identified yet. And I even
Like what?
contacted people who were, I came up with this like a mind map, a visual mind map that shows you all the different conditions that I'm noticing are related to this anti-Indigenous racism in First Nations communities.
Right.
And how, the neurodivergence, the trauma responses, the medical avoidance, all these different factors were all contributing to a person who doesn't want to receive care because of the abuses they've received, but also isn't receiving the care because the medical system doesn't know who they are and doesn't know their issues properly in order to give them the care they deserve.
Right. Wow.
So,
of course, when we're talking about Winnipeg, that's where you live, right? Winnipeg. And Winnipeg, I don't know about you, but I pay attention to murdered and missing Indigenous women who've gone missing. I make sure to share their pictures, and the numbers of them coming out of Winnipeg is astronomical compared to the rest of Canada. I don't know about the United States, but certainly the rest of Canada. So something pretty profound is happening in Winnipeg that is harming Indigenous people. I don't know what the answer is, of course, but I just want to be able to say that out loud. Of course, Ovid, we started this conversation without really telling people who you are. And so you've been sharing your brilliance with us. How many degrees do you almost have? Tell us what they are.
I almost have 2 degrees, just the engineering and then the graphic arts, the graphic design.
And graphic design. And what else you went to school for something else though too, didn't you? Or
I took journeyman cook, and I got that as well.
Journeyman cook.
Yeah, I wanted to be a cook up until the point where I was in a kitchen and they decided they didn't want me in their kitchen. They wouldn't let me out of they would only let me empty the trash can.
Yeah, I've often wondered that when I've gone into restaurants, normal restaurants that aren't First Nations restaurants. And I've looked around and thought, why are there no Indigenous people here? Why are there no waiters who are Indigenous? Why are there no cooks who are Indigenous? Where are the Indigenous people? And I've often thought that had a racist background, and what you're describing to me is a racist background.
Yeah, they told me openly that they didn't want to be the first restaurant in Vancouver to have, an Indigenous person working in the kitchen.
Oh my God.
And this was back in the, the early 90s.
Well, it hasn't changed. Unless you seek out one of our many wonderful Indigenous restaurants and cooks here in Vancouver, in the Lower Mainland. We do have them. And but yeah, the regular average white restaurant doesn't have them. And I ask everybody out there, when you are in a restaurant and you don't see an Indigenous person working in there, ask, where are your Indigenous people? Yeah. Why are they not here? Because it does have a racist foundation to it. Thank you, Ovid. I have so many more things to talk to you about, but I think we've run out of time. Okay. So thank you for what you're doing and what you continue to do out there. And I am going to look forward to seeing what other things you dig out of history and put up on TikTok for the rest of us to learn from. I appreciate it each time that I see something. So thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back, folks.
Oh, you hear this? A lot of people call this rock and roll swings. This is done with the, let's see, with the left hand, yeah. And the right hand fits in with something like this here. Here we go now.
Yeah, it's called rock and roll, and you can hear all about it on Rock Talk. Discover the hidden but enchanting side of the music. Friday mornings at 9 o'clock.
Oh, if that isn't enchanting, nothing is. Go ahead, kids. Dance. Go crazy.
We are not owned by the Emperor, so we can say the Emperor has no clothes.
Vancouver Cooperative Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM.
You're listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and that's our show. My thanks to Ovid Thomas for coming and chatting with me. This is the second time I've had him on, and every time I have these sort of brilliant conversations with him and am so grateful for them. So if you want to check out Ovid, you can find him on TikTok, Ovid Thomas, O-V-I-D, as in David, and Thomas, T-H, as in Harry, O-M, as in Mary, A-S, as in Sam. Music today was by Sherry Ulrich, as always, singing us in and out of this program. And of course, my thanks goes out to you for joining us today. Stay safe out there. You've just listened to Rethreading Madness, where we dare to change how we think about mental health. We air live on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM, every Tuesday at 5 p.m. or online at coopradio.org. If you have questions or feedback about this program, or want to share your story, or have something to say to us, we want to hear from you. You can reach us by email, rethreadingmadness@coopradio.org. This is Bernadine Fox. We'll be back next week. Until then.
When I've never been further from knowing what the hell I'm gonna do, when I can't seem to find my way under or over or through, just when I'm ready to give up the fight, there you are when we turn out the lights, and it's alright, it's alright, don't you worry, it'll be alright. Why do I always believe it when you tell me everything's gonna be alright? Yeah. Why don't I wonder how you know? Well, surely you don't have all of the facts. You could be just making it up. Why don't I ever think of that? It's some kind of magic in the words that you breathe, saying, baby, take it from me. It's alright, it's alright. Don't you worry, it'll be alright. Why do I always believe it when you tell me everything's gonna be alright? Everything's gonna be alright. With anyone else, it's such a cliche, just words people say to be nice. Or somehow when they fall from your lips, I'm convinced you're right. When I'm weary and so tired, when I'm worn out and done, when I fall off the wire again, with no more strength to get back on, there you are with that voice in my ear, saying the words that I need to hear. It's alright, it's alright.